In the mid-'70s, you began experimenting with, and recording too, disco soul music, and now you've embraced this music again with Chic's Nile Rodgers, and the evidence of the single anyway.
Yeah.
What has been the inspiration then behind your current direction?
When I went to Rarotonga to do the Oshima movie, I wanted to pull out some cassettes and tapes to take with me. For something to listen to. And I found that my natural inclination was to choose mainly rhythm and blues from the 50s and 60s. That I wanted to find stuff that I could play over and over again, because in the South Pacific it can get very boring.
That's a real desert island disc situation.
It really is a desert, yeah. And so I really was doing my desert island discs in a way, and I found it was interesting to see what in fact I did choose. Everything from James Brown to Alan Freed Rock and Roll Orchestra. Elmore James, Albert King. I surprised myself. I eventually got there. There was just about nothing representing the last 15, 20 years.
Amazing.
And that's why and then I asked myself, why have I chosen this music? What is it about this that makes me play it over and over again? And the fact was that it had such a human, emotional quality to it, without making, without pinpointing a tight situation. It's very non-uptight music, and it comes from a sense of pleasure and happiness, and there's a enthusiasm and an optimism on those recordings.
Maybe we could take a break now and just hear maybe a track that you would have taken to your desert island then. Of all the things you remembered, is there something going in your head that you'd like to hear now? I mean, you mentioned some great names like Elmore James there. And,
yeah. Okay, all right then. Try and find this one. Bobby Gregg and his band playing The Jam.
That was Bobby Gregg and his band with The Jam that David Bowie took down to the South Pacific when he was working on a film a few months ago. Because you were doing R&B yourself, weren't you, in the 1960s?
I desperately wanted to be a rhythm and blues saxophonist. I mean, that was my big thing. I wanted to be part of an equivalent of the Little Richard Band. I mean, that was my ideal thing to do when I was about... Actually, that was earlier. When I was about 13 or 14, that's what I wanted to do. So I played tenor with a few bands around town in those days. But I got into one band. I think it was... Now, which band would it have been? God. I think it was a different band every week. Or it was the same band and we changed their name a lot. I can't remember which. It all blurs. But I found that I wanted to start writing my own material for that band. And the sax started taking second place to singing and writing songs.
Back in 1982 and now 83, working with Nile Rodgers.
Yeah.
How did the two of you meet up? Did you know each other from before?
We firstly met in a club in New York. No, I'd never met Nile before. I'd always thought his work was really good. I mean, it was just a wonderful bass and rhythm sound, and guitar. His guitar playing is also excellent. We met in a club in New York and inevitably started talking about our own reference point. We wanted to find something, a common area, and as one does with a new person, sort of find out what you like. And we both started talking about rhythm and blues stuff, and we both knew all exactly the same discs and records and bands. And then when I had to consider who I wanted to work with on a new album, I thought, well, let's give Nile a try, see if he'd be at all interested in working with me, because of my own sort of rediscovery of rhythm and blues stuff.
And he would have been aware, of course, of what you were doing in the mid-'70s as well.
But yeah, very much so. So it was a good combination.
Good. He knew the heart would have been there. The other question that I know the press has asked you millions of times, but I haven't heard the answer myself, is that after so many successful years and records with RCA, you've changed. You're now with EMI America.
Yes.
So why the change?
By the end of my contract with RCA, there was no love lost between us. We didn't... I think the belief had gone in each other. I didn't believe in RCA, and they certainly had fallen out with me around the time of Low. There was no real interest in Low, and many of the albums from there on. And it was sort of, we just went through the movements of being artist and record company, so I was really quite glad when I was able to terminate. that particular contract.
I mean, I find that unbelievable because any record company, any other record company would have been glad to sort of take you on because, I mean, you're the sort of artist who keeps a lot of lesser-known artists afloat.
I think familiarity had bred contempt. I mean, we're quite happy to take a short space from each other, a long space from each other.
All right, then. How do you react, then, to the numerous Decca and the RCA reissues that have cropped up in the last couple of years in the absence of new material from you? These sort of releases that, in fact, chart in the UK.
I think they're horrendous. I think the compilations are done, they sound like they were done in about half an hour over a board meeting or something. Packaging is generally atrocious. And I find it most offensive.
What about the Rarities album, the Italian compilation that came out? Is that as well?
I'm not quite sure what the point of it is, except to maybe pick up a few extra bucks or something. I mean, it really is something. If they'd wanted a compilation, they should have come to me and asked me to put something together for them, and I would have given them something very interesting. But, of course, they don't ask me these things. They just put them out. And I dare say they will continue to put out compilations of albums, which I have absolutely no understanding or control of.
Do you have a record yourself of all the things that you've ever recorded? Do you have a collection of all your work?
No, I'm not a very good back fan. I get a lot of stuff. I mean, a lot of my audience are really good like that. They send into the New York office an awful lot of stuff that they think I might not have heard. So I've heard and know about just about every bootleg that's been done. Mm-hmm. And I've even had studio tracks in the early days that I didn't know existed come through to me. Very early version of, what was it, I'm Waiting for the Man, which I did in somewhere like, it was about 1970, the 1970s version of that, which floored me. I can't remember doing it to this day, and it's definitely me.
Amazing.
It's quite definitely me.
What about other memorabilia or paraphernalia, like a stylophone, for example, that you used in Space Oddity? Do you have anything like that?
I probably have that. Things I've got, I think, every item of clothing I've ever worn. I always keep that stuff. I can't, stuff like that, I find I'm very reluctant to throw away. I've got all the very early Kansai costumes and all the early stuff in the Rainbow and the stuff that was specially made and all the Dada-looking things. I've got all that.
What about the Ziggy Stardust period? Now, that seems to be, musically, for a lot of people today who always quote you as being a prime influence. Does that seem, the Ziggy Stardust fella himself, is he a long time ago in a far-off place, or is he still fairly fresh to you?
I can't. Happened then? I find him very refreshing to look at. I mean, it's an extraordinary. It was an extraordinary phenomenon in rock at that time. I can't really relate to the kind of enthusiasm I must have had for him at the time. That I'm very much divorced in that situation. It is hard to connect with that. But that's been with purpose. I've really cut myself off purposely from that situation because for so many years it hindered my own physical and emotional state, and it was such a hard thing to try and live his life. It was not pleasant, so I really closed the door on him.
Now, as I said, people constantly quote you as being a major influence on their own music, notably Gary Newman, Japan, the Human League. I mean, do you see your own influence when you hear records by these other people, particularly coming out of Great Britain? Oh,
of course I do, but it certainly doesn't stop me from liking some of these bands and feeling very... I mean, I really encouraged people to try and listen to or accept Human League for a start. I was great fans of theirs from the moment they came out. I thought they were really... they had some very interesting things to say. Yes, I do. I do see those influences.
Yeah. Do you ever play any other? I mean, modern. I mean, you were talking about the R&B stuff.
Yeah.
Are you aware? Do you keep up to date with what's happening in this country?
No, I never. I'm not very. I'm not a great follower of modern music. I never was. My influences. I purposely have never listened to the music of the moment when I've been writing or working. Because I wanted my stuff to come from a direction that wasn't involved with whatever was going on at the time. Or if I did listen to modern music, it was usually something right off the wall, or something that really nobody was listening to. And it would be ethnic music, or even modern classical music, or I guess when there was a proliferation of punk and new wave music, I was listening mainly to Philip Glass and Steve Reich at the time, which was a lot calmer, more transcendental kind of music format. So I try and run against the grain to, I think, keep my own writing sounding fresh and feeling fresh.
How about the Bauhaus single? What was your reaction to that? Did you enjoy what they had done?
It was a shock to hear Ziggy Stardust being revived by anybody other than myself. I must admit that. I don't think it was that successful. I'm not quite sure why they did a cover version. But there again, I'm hardly one to talk because my cover versions are usually quite dreadful. I can only think of a few that I quite like.
Well, name one, then we can play something.
Can't Explain from the Pin-Ups album, I like.
David Bowie and his version of Pin-Ups of Can't Explain. I remember meeting you in France when you were recording that album.
That's right,
well.
yes, at Deauville.
That's right, yeah, sure. Now, and you've recorded with other people, of course, over the years,
yeah.
Notably Bing Crosby and Queen and John Lennon. I mean, is there anybody that you can think of that you'd really like to do a duet with, that you haven't worked with, that you would like to
absolutely no one. There never was in the first place. These things just seem to come about. I've never really wanted to record with other people. These things just sort of happened. I can't think of anybody offhand that I would. Yes, it would be a lot of fun, with absolutely no purpose, but a lot of fun to make a record with Kraftwerk. That would be fun.
Now, working, obviously, on stage like The Elephant Man, I guess is a bit more like being on stage making music as opposed to being on location doing a film. Do you know any stage fear at all? Because I saw you on television in America when you were doing The Elephant Man, and I thought, this is really brave. And you carried it off with the same kind of conviction you would carry off performing in some music, perhaps.
First night of Elephant Man was probably the most frightening stage thing for me ever.
Well, it is the most demanding role I have ever seen anyone take on, certainly.
I was terrified before going on stage with that thing.
I think listeners who are not aware should know that you played The Elephant Man without any kind of makeup. There was you were yourself on stage, but you threw yourself into this character, and it was easy to forget that you were watching David Bowie, and I thought that was a success.
It was the disorders were intimated rather than seen, yeah. I think that is the thing with John Merrick, the character, is that the deformities were so awful that it would be hard to see past those deformities and see the real person. If that was what you were faced with on stage, you'd be continually looking at the makeup job and seeing the actor trying to come out of it. A problem, I presume, that John Hurt had to contend with when he did the film version. On stage, I think, in fact, it helped not to have the makeup. In fact, it didn't hinder it at all.
What about the other movie you've done then? Because you mentioned something you're pleased with, which is Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence,
yeah.
Which we should be seeing in the springtime. What about The Hunger?
The Hunger, again, for me, was successful in terms of the very thing I've just been saying. Oh, dear. It's a makeup job. I have to work through layers and layers of plastic. But I think the success of that is that because he's an older man, about 300 years old, the makeup that Dick Smith did for that is so incredibly real that he made it work on muscle to muscle. If I move a muscle of my face, it's reflected in the makeup itself, and it's quite the most sensational makeup. It's fantastic.
You're playing an old man in this.
Yeah. Well, he ages from his mid-30s to about 300 in about 2.5 days, I think.
Why? Can you tell us anything about it?
It's a little vampire experience, and his time clock goes wrong. Because he's not a real vampire. He was made into a vampire. And as we all know, real vampires can stay around forever, but the pretenders don't last above 300 years or something. It's a funny little piece.
And that is out this year as well?
That comes out this year. I think that's quite soon, actually. I think that's about March or April release.
And sure. Catherine Deneuve is in it.
Catherine Deneuve is in it, and Susan Sarandon. Who's Susan in particular? Catherine is excellent, but Susan Sarandon for me is absolutely extraordinary. She's a great actress, fabulous actress.
I want to ask you about the new album finally now. Has this been a long time in the making? It certainly has been a while since we had a new album, but did it take you a while to record it?
No, it was put together in 3 weeks because I had a very good idea of what I wanted to do. So it's a very simple operation to actually execute it in the studio. The arrangements were done before we went in.
Would you describe it as a dance album? The title track is certainly danceable. Is the album with a similar theme?
I think you could dance to about everything on it, but really Let's Dance is, by virtue of its title and the instrumental makeup, the only real dance track on it.
Mm. Is it all your own material as well?
No, some of it is by others. I did a cover version of, half others actually, a song that I did write with Iggy Pop called China Girl. Mm-hmm. That's one of the tracks. And one track that I didn't write, in fact, was by a London, I think they're a London band, I might be wrong, called Metro.
They had a single out called Criminal World a few years ago.
That's the song that I covered on the album. I always thought that was a wonderful song.
Yeah, so did I. Remember that on Transatlantic Records.
Yeah, it was really good.
Okay, and this album is coming out sometime mid-April, I think.
Yes.
Right. Now, about the stage show, and this is what everybody can't wait to see, and it was sold out within hours of being announced in London and in Birmingham, and you've got some European dates as well.
Yeah.
The Serious Moonlight Tour, now, it's the line I know in Let's Dance, Serious Moonlight. What is it a whole concept, a moonlight or a moonlit concept?
Yeah, I wanted something which would give a general atmosphere to the tour. The Serious Moonlight, for me, it's the romanticism, it's the inherent quality of two people being together, a relationship between two people, that I wanted to retain what I feel is the positive force on the new album, which is trying to see the world through the eyes of a couple. And I want to retain that kind of feeling for stage, that it's on a more humanist level than anything I've done on stage before. It's not quite so icy.
That's what I remember best when you came with the Station to Station tour, and it was very icy.
Yeah.
My palms were in fact sweating because the support was not an act as such, but rather a film, the Chien Andalou.
Yeah.
And that was really unnerving, and I was thinking,
Yes,
God, what have we got in store here? What have I let myself in for
I was
here?
reflecting my own personality at the time, unfortunately. Those days are long gone.
Are you going to be doing any old material on stage this
I
time?
think I will probably be able to cameo just about every period that I've been involved in as a writer. I still find it very enjoyable to do a lot of the old material. I've changed the instrumentation on some of the pieces because they don't excite me as such anymore. So I've had to do something to make them exciting for me, otherwise I wouldn't be able to perform them with any real conviction. So I've made some allowances for that. But I've covered everything, I think, back to Man Who Sold the World, I think.
Wow. All right. Well, I'd like to thank you for your time here. And perhaps you might suggest a track. This is going to be difficult, but one of your older numbers that still gives you a real kick to do on stage where you perhaps haven't had to change it that much.
Crikey. That's all I can say to that.
Is there something that...
I guess Revel.
All right. We'll play us out with that. And I look forward to seeing you in June in London.
Okay.
All right.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.